Sure, here's a 500-word story based on the topic. When you grow old, how to overcome loneliness. The bench by the lake. Eleanor had lived in the same small town for over 70 years. The trees knew her name, and the lake down the road mirrored the silver in her hair. She walked there every morning with her cane tapping gently on the gravel, a sound that became part of the lake's daily rhythm. After her husband passed 5 years ago, the silence in her house grew loud. Her children had families of their own, miles away, and the visits had become holiday events rather than weekly check-ins. At first, she tried to fill the quiet with television shows and crossword puzzles. But the ache of loneliness settled into her bones like the cold in winter. One morning, Eleanor sat down on her favorite bench, the one shaded by an old oak. As she looked out at the still water, she sighed, "I never thought growing old would feel like fading." A jogger paused nearby to tie his shoe. He glanced her way and smiled. "Good morning, ma'am." Eleanor smiled back, surprised by how much warmth such a small gesture gave. "Good morning." The next day, she brought a bag of breadcrumbs and began feeding the ducks. A young girl walking with her mother pointed excitedly. "Look, Mommy, ducks!" Eleanor chuckled. "Would you like to help me feed them?" she offered. That moment became routine. Children stopped by with their parents. Teens sat nearby and asked her questions about the old days. A group of retirees began gathering near her bench for morning walks, and soon Eleanor found herself surrounded by voices again. New voices, but welcome ones. She started a little book club with some of the women. On Sundays, she volunteered to read at the local library. Once a month, she hosted a tea afternoon for anyone in the community who needed a place to feel less alone. She discovered something she hadn't expected. Connection didn't depend on age. It came from shared stories, from listening as much as talking, from choosing to be present in the world around her. One day, a young man sat beside her on the bench. His shoulders were slouched, his eyes tired. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Eleanor simply handed him a piece of bread to toss to the ducks. In that quiet, she realized the great secret of loneliness. It doesn't end by waiting for someone to fix it. It fades when you extend your hand, offer a smile, create space for someone else. That connection, however small, is the bridge. So Eleanor kept showing up each day to the bench by the lake, not waiting to be remembered, but choosing to be part of life again. Want me to help you turn this story into a short voice clip too? We just need to trim it to 2 sentences for that. Absolutely. Here's a second 500-word paragraph to continue the story, deepening Eleanor's journey and touching more on how she truly overcomes loneliness in her later years. Winter crept into the town slowly, frosting the lake's edge and bare branches. Eleanor bundled in her thick coat and still made her way to the bench, her breath small clouds in the morning air. The bench was hers now, not by ownership, but by ritual. It had become a symbol of her decision not to retreat into herself. And as she sat with her gloved hands clasped in her lap, she thought back to the early days after her husband had passed. There had been mornings she hadn't even gotten out of bed, days when the sound of her own voice startled her because it had gone so long unused. But something had changed. Not quickly, and not without effort. At first, it had been just showing up, just choosing to go outside, to walk, to exist where others might be. And now she saw the impact of that simple decision all around her. Across the lake, a group of school children came into view, their teacher waving when she spotted Eleanor. It had become a regular part of their class to stop by and speak with her, to ask her about history, about nature, about life. Eleanor had become a living book of wisdom for them. But more than that, she had become familiar, part of their lives. One of the little girls, Mia, ran ahead of the group and plopped down beside her, cheeks red from the cold. "Miss Eleanor, do you ever get lonely?" Mia asked with the kind of bluntness only a child could manage. Eleanor smiled, her eyes crinkling. "Sometimes," she said honestly. "But I learned something important. Loneliness doesn't mean you're alone. It means you haven't found the right ways to connect yet." Mia tilted her head. "Like making new friends?" "Exactly," Eleanor said. "And sometimes helping someone else feel less alone helps you feel that way too." She had found truth in that. Whether it was teaching a teenager how to knit, giving soup to the homeless shelter once a week, or simply writing letters to old friends she hadn't spoken to in years, Eleanor had begun to plant seeds of connection everywhere she could. And in doing so, something bloomed inside her that she thought had long since withered. One afternoon, the mayor visited the park with a small group and announced they were naming the bench after her. Eleanor's Place, where loneliness ends and community begins. She had cried, not because of the honor, but because it confirmed what she already knew, that her life still had meaning. That age did not render her invisible, that love, presence, and kindness were not bound by youth. Now, even in the coldest months, Eleanor never sat alone for long. Someone always joined her. And more often than not, it wasn't just to talk, but to listen, to feel, to remember that life is richer when shared, no matter your age. Let me know if you'd like to turn a short moment from this into a voice clip. Of course. Here's another 200-word continuation to deepen the story. As spring approached, Eleanor began keeping a small notebook with her on the bench. She started writing down the names of people she met, snippets of conversations, and reflections on what she'd learned from each encounter. It wasn't meant to be a diary. It was a reminder that her days were still full of meaning. She called it her connection journal. Sometimes she flipped through the pages and smiled at the variety of people who had sat beside her. A newly retired couple adjusting to a quieter life, a teenager who confided about feeling lost, a widower who hadn't spoken about his wife in years until Eleanor gently asked. She realized that loneliness wasn't just a symptom of aging. It was something people of all ages experienced. But unlike years ago, when loneliness made her feel helpless, she now saw it as an invitation, an opportunity to reach out, share a smile, lend an ear. Every entry in that journal was proof. Connection could be created, nurtured, and treasured, no matter your age. And Eleanor, once convinced her most meaningful years were behind her, now understood they were happening every day, one conversation, one smile, one shared silence at a time. Want to voice over a short part of this? Happy to help.